You wake up, and you already know how the day's going to go. You know you're supposed to start early. You know what needs to get done. You even wrote it down last night. But somewhere between opening your eyes and actually moving, something shifts. It's not laziness. It's not even resistance. It's more like a quiet negotiation, a small voice that says, "Later is fine." And you believe it. Because later sounds reasonable. Later sounds like you're still in control, but later becomes lunch. Lunch becomes afternoon. Afternoon becomes, "I'll start fresh tomorrow." And tomorrow feels exactly like today. You're not failing. You're not broken. You're just stuck in a version of discipline that doesn't actually fit how your brain works. The version where you're supposed to feel motivated first, where you're supposed to want it badly enough, where willpower is supposed to carry you through, but it doesn't, and it hasn't, and you're tired of pretending that one day it will. So you sit there, knowing what you should do, and still not doing it. Not because you don't care, but because caring hasn't been enough. This is one of the most common experiences among adults who actually want to improve. People who aren't lazy. People who have responsibilities, goals, standards for themselves. People who read about discipline, who try different methods, who genuinely believe they'll figure it out soon. But most of them are operating under a misunderstanding. They think discipline is about pushing harder, about finding the right mindset, about finally getting serious enough. So they wait for the moment when it clicks, when they feel ready, when the decision feels right, and that moment doesn't come. Or it comes for a day, maybe a week, then it fades, and they're back to the same cycle wondering what's wrong with them. But nothing's wrong. The issue isn't the person. It's the belief that discipline starts with feeling like doing it. Many of us grew up associating discipline with effort, with fighting yourself, with gritting your teeth and forcing it, and that works for a little while, until the effort runs out, until life gets heavy, until you're too tired to fight yourself every single morning. And that's when people start to think they're just not disciplined, that maybe they don't have what it takes, that other people must have some internal engine they're missing. But other people aren't different. They're just doing it differently. They've stopped waiting for the feeling. They've stopped negotiating with themselves. They've stopped treating every small action like it needs to be justified first. They've learned something most people never quite grasp. Discipline isn't about how you feel. It's about what you do when feeling has nothing to do with it. I used to think discipline was supposed to feel strong, like conviction, like certainty. I thought if I really wanted something, the action would follow naturally. And sometimes it did, but only when I was excited, only when it was new, only when I could see the result clearly in my mind. The problem was, most of life isn't exciting. Most of the work that matters is repetitive, boring, invisible for a long time. And I kept waiting for the day I'd feel different about it. The day I'd stop needing to convince myself. The day it would just be easy. That day never came. What came instead was a shift in how I thought about the whole thing. I stopped asking myself if I felt like doing it. I stopped checking in with my mood, my energy, my motivation level. I started asking a different question. What happens if I just start? Not, what happens if I finish? Not, what happens if I do this perfectly? Just, what happens if I begin? Right now, in this exact state, tired, distracted, unmotivated. And what happened was, I started. Not with energy, not with clarity, but with movement. And movement changes everything. Because discipline isn't a feeling, it's a pattern. And patterns don't require inspiration. They require repetition. They require the smallest possible version of the action, done before the mind has time to build a case against it. Most people think the hard part is doing the work, but the hard part is the moment right before, the moment when you're deciding, when you're weighing options, when you're giving yourself room to choose. That's where discipline dies, in the gap between knowing and doing. And the only way to close that gap is to remove the choice. Discipline, in its most practical form, is just this: deciding once, then executing without redeciding. You don't wake up and ask yourself if you're going to brush your teeth. You just do it, because it's not a decision anymore. It's a sequence, and that's what most people are missing. They're treating every disciplined action like a fresh decision. Every morning is a new negotiation. Every workout is a new internal debate. But the brain doesn't work well with constant decision-making. It gets tired. It starts looking for shortcuts. It starts offering you reasons to skip, delay, adjust. And if you're listening to those reasons, you're already losing. The goal isn't to fight those reasons. The goal is to stop listening, to treat the action the same way you treat breathing. Non-negotiable, automatic, part of the structure. This doesn't mean you never rest. It doesn't mean you ignore your body or push through pain. It means you separate the action from the feeling. You stop letting how you feel dictate whether or not you follow through. Because here's the truth: you will almost never feel like doing the hard thing. And if you wait until you do, you'll wait forever. Discipline isn't built in the moments when you're motivated. It's built in the moments when you're not. When it's raining, when you're tired, when no one's watching, when it doesn't feel like it matters. Those are the moments that count. Not because they're heroic, but because they're the ones that teach your brain a new pattern. A pattern that says, we do this, regardless. And once that pattern is in place, the feeling starts to follow. Not before, after. You don't feel disciplined, then act. You act, then the identity of someone who is disciplined begins to form. Slowly, quietly, without announcement. But it only happens if you start. And starting doesn't require clarity. It requires motion. Let's bring this into real life. You're sitting at your desk. You told yourself you'd work on that thing today. The thing you've been putting off for weeks. The thing that actually matters. But you're scrolling, or staring, or thinking about how you're not in the right headspace yet. And the longer you sit there, the harder it gets. Because now you're not just avoiding the task. You're watching yourself avoid it. And that creates a loop. A guilt loop. A frustration loop. A why am I like this loop? But here's what most people don't realize. That loop only exists because you're still deciding. The moment you stop deciding and just open the file, the loop breaks. You don't have to feel ready. You don't have to feel inspired. You just have to move your hand. Click the thing. Type one sentence. And once you've typed one sentence, the next one comes easier. Not because you suddenly feel motivated, but because you're already in motion. And motion has momentum. This applies to everything. Working out, studying, cleaning, writing, building. Any action that requires you to show up when you don't feel like it. The trick isn't to pump yourself up. The trick is to shrink the first step so small that there's no room for resistance. You don't commit to a full workout. You commit to putting on your shoes. You don't commit to finishing the project. You commit to opening the document. And most of the time, once you've started, you keep going. Not because you're suddenly disciplined, but because the hardest part was just beginning. This is how discipline becomes practical. You stop treating it like a personality trait. You stop waiting to become the kind of person who just does things. You become that person by doing things. Over and over. In the smallest, most boring ways possible. No one's watching. No one's cheering. There's no reward at the end of the day. But you did it. And tomorrow, you'll have proof that you can. There's something else that happens when you start building this kind of discipline. Something most people don't talk about. You stop needing external validation. Because the proof isn't in what people see. It's in what you know. You know you showed up when it was hard. You know you didn't negotiate. You know you followed through. And that changes how you see yourself. Not in a loud way, Not in a way you'd put on social media, but in a quiet, steady way that makes everything else easier. Because now, when life gets heavy, you don't panic, you don't spiral, you don't wonder if you have what it takes. You already know, because you've done it before, in small ways, in invisible ways, in ways no one else will ever see. And that's where real confidence comes from. Not from winning, not from being perfect, but from knowing you can trust yourself to start, even when you don't feel like it. This is the foundation. This is what people mean when they talk about self-mastery. It's not about controlling every outcome. It's about controlling the one thing you actually can, whether or not you begin. Everything else builds from there. I'm not here to tell you this will be easy, or that one day you'll wake up and discipline will just feel natural. But I am here to tell you this. You don't need it to feel natural. You just need it to happen. And it can. Today. Right now. In whatever small way makes sense for you. If you've been putting something off, open it. If you've been avoiding something, start it. If you've been waiting to feel ready, stop waiting. You won't feel ready, but you'll be moving. And movement is enough. This is what we talk about here. Not motivation, not hype, just the practical, boring, powerful reality of showing up. Over and over, until it's not a fight anymore, until it's just what you do. And if that's something you want more of, you know where to find it. Not because I'm asking you to subscribe, but because you'll want to come back to this kind of clarity, to this kind of calm, to the reminder that you don't need to be perfect, you just need to start. And starting is always available. So maybe you close this and go back to what you were doing. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you take one small action. Just one. Not because it's going to change everything today, but because it's the first repetition in a pattern that will. And patterns don't need to feel good to work. They just need to repeat. You don't need to figure it all out right now. You don't need a plan. You don't need to know where this leads. You just need to move. And once you do, you'll see. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming someone who starts, every time, without asking permission from your feelings first. That's the shift. That's the difference. That's the thing that changes everything, without changing anything at all. And it's already in you, waiting, not for the right moment, just for movement. So whenever you're ready, or even if you're not, you can begin.